to we're recording this, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. So my name is Hannah. I use they, them pronouns. I am an instructor with Outward Bound Canada. I work full-time right now with the Training Academy, which is really exciting. So if you haven't already checked out the Training Academy website, go and do that. There's lots on there. And there's people in this chat too who can help answer questions about that. First, before we get started, I want to contextualize you a little bit of where I'm physically located right now. So I move around a lot and I call a lot of places home, but a place really close to me is Kitchener, which is where I am right now. I'm in Waterloo. And Kitchener-Waterloo, if you don't know, so it's southwestern Ontario, depending on where you're joining from. And this land is Haudenosaunee territory, Anishinaabe territory, and Neutral Peoples territory. And the Haldimand Tract Treaty Territory is what covers this, that follows along the Grand River from source to finish, or Osi Ganahadaje in Mohawk, otherwise known as the Willow River, translated into English. And so the Haldimand Tract was promised to the Haudenosaunee for their allyship with the British during the war of the U.S. War, the Independence War in 1776, and so this came out of that. If you're really interested in getting to know a little bit more about Kitchener-Waterloo, if you live around here or travel through here, two things to check out for more information around this land. One would be 1492 Landback Lane. They're based in Six Nations, which is the biggest reserve in Canada and is in the Haldimand Tract. So 1492 Landback Lane, they do a lot of really great organizing. And then also Landback Camp is Two-Spirit queer, Indigenous queer folks who do a lot of really amazing organizing in the Waterloo region. So check out those two things. And I think land acknowledgements, especially in outdoor education, are important to contextualize how we are in our spaces. I'm a settler, a white settler queer person in this work, and so connecting to the land and learning stories and meanings behind the land is really important and impactful for me as someone who brings people out onto the land and tries to educate people as well on the land. So I encourage you, if you don't know, to look into the places that you travel through and the places you call home and learn something new about them. So winter, we're in it, it's happening. Winter, it was not always a season that I loved. I grew up in Winnipeg, or Winterpeg, as some of you might know it as, and it was just really cold. I remember playing sometimes, but it was just too cold. And then I lived for 3 years in West Africa when I was 16 to 19, and I didn't have winter at all. And I didn't really miss it until I got back to Canada, and I really realized that I was missing this. And that was my first time when I was an adult. I realized that I needed to have fun in winter to create a relationship with it. And so if you are feeling like you don't have a relationship to winter at all, my first encouragement would be, what is play and what is fun for you, and to do fun activities in the wintertime. No one is happy when they're not having fun. So, that was really important for me for building that relationship. These are some fun pictures of me in the winter over the last couple of years. The one on the lower left-hand corner right here, that was just taken last week, doing some work with Outward Bound. So it's fun stuff. Anyway, so what's your relationship to winter like? I want to know. Is it like this? Is it like this? Is it like this? Or is it like this? So go to this Mentimeter and it's that same code there. And this should start populating as people put in, what's your current relationship to winter at this point in your life for you? Are you excited by the beauty? Are you like, urban snow? Are you excited by the play? It looks like someone is. Are you like, yes, winter sports? Are you like, I want to cozy hibernate? and rest for this season? What's your kind of go-to? Well, this is fun. Let's see it tally in real time. Wow, there's zero for, okay, there we go. Urban snow. I feel like that's real. Sometimes if I have to wipe off my car, oh God. Nice. Wow, we're all like pretty across the board here. I'm gonna give this just a couple more seconds. This helps me just figure out where people are coming from. Plus, it's fun. Okay, I'm gonna go to the next slide. And this is, I want to know for you, what is it? I know hate's a really strong word, but what is there, like, why do people not like winter? Why do people not like winter? It's freezing. Oh, rain in the winter? Yeah, that's a hard one. That continuously gets me when it rains in the winter, especially when you're outside for multiple days and it's raining. Too cold? I get that. And someone once told me there's no challenging, or there's challenging weather, there's no bad weather, there's just like bad clothing, which I think there's a lot of truth to that, and we'll talk a lot about that. It's also is really cold. Like it's -40 and you're like, it's cold. Shoveling your driveway, snowstorms. Okay, people, yeah. Harder to find wildlife. Yeah, it depends how we're finding the wildlife too. There's a lot more tracks. There's just like evidence of the wildlife, which is cool. Cool. Okay, so lots of reasons to hate it. What is there to love about it? Because I think often we can get stuck on that, what is there to hate about it? And what grounds me is, and what brings me outside continuously in the winter is like that there's something pulling me. And this doesn't have to be something that you love right now. The snow is so magical. There's like so many different types of snow actually, and how the pieces all come together. No bugs. Yes, my partner really hates bugs, and so winter is like the season for us because there's no bugs. There's like those what are they called? They're in like the snow fleas, but they're not actual fleas, but they can like jump far. They're really cool. That happens when it's like there's warmer weather out. The quiet, fresh snow. Yeah. Skiing. I went cross country skiing yesterday with my 4-year-old nephew. Well, it was more like me making a track, and he was following behind me. It was very fun. Like, nice. Okay, so I'm sorry if you are writing an answer, and I'm gonna exit this right now. Cozy like that. Okay, so this is our plan for the day. We're gonna talk about kind of the science of heat loss, different clothing systems. I think a lot of people get scared about clothing and don't have a lot of knowledge around it, or have some knowledge but don't know how to piece it together. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about eating and drinking, and then a lot of questions I feel like people might have is sleeping warm outside. Okay, and this is my hope, that you feel super down and that you can take on winter like a boss. I love this picture. Also, this kid knows sun safety, because look at those sunglasses. That is important for winter. So before we get into anything else about mitigation, well, we'll talk about mitigation measures as we go, but heat loss. So our body is basically a furnace. Okay, you're producing heat through chemical reactions and activity. So eating calories, your metabolism system, and then physical activity. And everyone knows that if you're cold, start moving, right? And so our body is working to maintain core temperatures, at 37 degrees Celsius to protect our vital organs. And there's 5 main ways that we lose our heat. And so in the winter time, I think it's really important to know those 5 different ways so that we can learn how to mitigate as much as possible that heat loss from our body that our body is continuously producing. So this, you have to think back to like high school science class now for this. Conduction. So heat loss from direct contact. So this is, examples of this are like sitting on, in this thing here, this guy's like sitting on a rock. So any direct contact, so touching things, sitting on things, standing on cold surfaces, lying on the snow, anything that's through like direct contact. And we can lose about 7% of our body heat, depending on how much is exposed, but to that. And so a lot through this presentation, I'm going to be presenting you with information and then presenting you with mitigation measures. Now, there's going to be a lot of like tips and tricks coming at you. So my goal for you is that, and how I'm coming to this, is that you pick a couple that resonate with you, write them down somewhere, and then come back to those throughout this winter and try them out. So there's going to be lots of tips and tricks coming to you, and take things of note for you. You're not going to be able to absorb everything. I know that. So take what's meaningful. So our tips and tricks for conduction: basically decrease how much you're touching things. We talk a lot about butt pads in the winter, which are basically like, you think of those blue foamies from like Canadian Tire, those like blue mats, or you can get like those accordion style ones. Basically you can like cut one up and have it as a butt pad, which is basically just like a seat. So it's an insulating layer. Anytime, if you're like going on a hike in the winter or you're winter camping and you want to sit down somewhere, put that under your bum, and that's going to keep you warmer. We're going to talk about our myths and sleeping in the winter and what are different R values and all of that. We'll talk about that later. And then the last thing I'll mention here is just having boots with a thick enough insole. Oftentimes when people are complaining of cold feet, one, it's because your boots are probably too tight, or not enough insulation and air in there. And two, if you can go out and buy just insoles, and that adds like a layer between the ground and your foot. Okay, evaporation. This makes me think of high school. I don't know. I feel like I have the Bill Nye the Science Guy dude in my brain when I'm like, evaporation is a cooling process. So we all know, we get out of the shower, it's cold, everything starts evaporating off of us, and it's like the most miserable part of showering is like the drying off process. So basically, winter, the biggest thing is just managing your sweat. You can lose between 20 to 25% of your body heat through that evaporation. And a really cool thing though, is that our body actually has the capacity to lose 85% of heat through that sweating, that evaporation. So in the summer, this really helps us out because we can lose a lot of heat that way, but we don't want to lose that heat when in the winter. So those tips and tricks then are going to be just wearing fabrics that wick away that sweat and adjusting your layers as you need. The adjustment. If you get anything out of this webinar, layers are important, and adjusting those layers are super, super important. The last three, a little quicker. Convection. So this is basically like the wind hitting you. If you were in moving water as well, you're going to get cold a lot faster in moving water than in still water, and that's because of convection. So basically, it's like taking those warmer molecules out of the skin away from you. Basically, just wear something that will cut the wind. So when we talk about we're going to talk about different layers and what those different layers are important for. The most important thing, if it's windy, cut that like by 8 to 15% of heat loss by simply putting on that windproof layer. Also, stand behind barriers like trees or in groves. Like, these things make sense to us, but sometimes when I'm out there, I'm like not thinking it. Radiation. So this one is basically, if you think about a radiator, right? They're radiating heat, or like a wood stove, it's radiating heat. So that's an object that's radiating its heat out to the area around it. And this and convection play hand in hand. As it radiates that heat out, then like wind can take that away as well. And this one is the most. We radiate out up to 65% of our heat. Most of that comes from the head. And so basically this is when insulation is important. So our insulating layers are what gonna mitigate us from this type of heat loss. And then the classic thing too, just stand in the sun. But make sure you have sun safety. And then the last, respiration, and really, so that's basically the heat that we lose through breathing. As we're breathing out warm air and we're breathing in cold air, and so there's heat loss that happens there. Really, it's not a huge amount, and there's not really much we can do because we have to still breathe. So that one we can't mitigate as much. Okay, so we have those 5 modes of heat loss. Basically, to all of that, these 4 things you need. You need to eat, you need to drink, because your body needs water in order to metabolize. So you have to drink water to actually be able to keep yourself warm. Physical activity and insulation. So make sure that you're keeping that heat that your body's producing, because radiation, you can lose up to 65%. So that's the most important part. Okay. That brings us into our clothing systems now. So layers, like we've been talking about, and that's going to be my like hitting home part, is this is the key to keeping our body heat and adjusting to what's happening continuously. So where was here? Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Okay, so when we talk about layers, we're talking in 3 categories mostly for the winter time, and I think in all seasons, but we don't really need all of these layers that much in all the other seasons, but we really need them in the winter time, and I find them very helpful in the winter time. So we got, and I'm going to use this language, so we got our base layers, so that's the layers that are closest to your skin. We have our mid layer, which its main function is insulation. And then we have our outer layer, which main function is for wind and rain or precipitation. So wind and snow, basically, in the winter. You can get rain in the winter. And the importance too for all of this is that your perspiration, so basically your sweating, is able to breathe through all of this and go through all of those. Now, it's really hard to get a system where you can actually have perfect breathing through all of those fabrics, and fabrics that breathe tend to be more expensive. So we'll talk about that a little bit, but that's because we said you can lose up to 25% of body heat through evaporation. Managing your perspiration and your ability for your clothing to breathe is really important. So our base layers. Our base layers is moisture management. Again, we said it's closest to your skin. So the purpose to keep your skin dry as possible. And there's different types of fabric that can wick, basically like absorbs it. It's like hydrophilic on one side of the fiber, so it absorbs that moisture, and hydrophobic on the other side, so it like pushes it out, basically. And the fit should be snug. You should be able to move around. It shouldn't be constricting you, but it should be like nicely up against your skin. Fabrics that are recommended, and we're gonna do a little like fun Minim Meter quiz thing on types of fabric. So the more and more I learn about winter, and the more and more I spend time out in winter and build my relationship with winter, the more and more it's like winter knowledge goes up, knowledge of fibers and materials also goes up. So they go really, really hand in hand. Yeah, so there's an example. There's a lovely picture there. I think I took that off of Smart Wool's website. So your base layer is that moisture management. Your mid layer is all about that insulation. So your insulation is your middle layer of clothing. Now, this is where most people tend to think about things to deal with, and or to make sure that they have those clothing. And the important thing too is have different weights of fabric. Okay. Yeah, different weights of fabric. So you have like thinner mid layers and thicker mid layers, depending on the temperature, depending on your physical activity. And again, allowing that moisture to escape as much as possible. So passing through those fibers. Wool is really, really, really good at that. It is the best material at allowing moisture to pass through it, as well as keeping you warm when you're wearing it and if it gets wet. Down, the one thing to think about it's a great insulating material. So down is like the under feathers of like goose. The one thing to think about with down too, though, is sometimes the nylon or the fabric that they have that like holds that garment together, sometimes that isn't super breathable. So that's one to be aware of. And yeah, and the important thing here is just the ability to constantly layer and delayer and layer and delayer. And then lastly, we have our outer layer, which is protection against the elements. So that's like your classic, jacket that has the windproofing ability. Now, I will say that I think a lot of times people want to buy like form-fitting jackets sometimes, especially in the winter. The bigger your jacket and the bigger your outer layer, the better, because then you have more versatility. And again, if there's anything you take, is all of that, like versatility is important. The fabrics, so Gore-Tex is really expensive, but it's like the leading fabric in terms of a synthetic waterproof fabric, and it's supposed to also be breathable. I have my own thoughts that nothing synthetic is entirely breathable, and also nothing is 100% waterproof. If someone says something's 100% waterproof, they're lying. Everything absorbs water at some point. And the one thing here though that I'll mention is that cotton is not a good fabric, a base layer or mid layer, because when it absorbs moisture, it keeps you cold. It doesn't keep you warm like wool would. However, cotton comes back into play here as cotton canvas as an external layer. And that's like the thick canvasy material, because cotton does breathe really well. And so as a canvas material on the outside, it allows things to go through. If you're interested in really getting into like backcountry winter travel and backcountry winter tripping, I would say look into different options around like cotton canvas anoraks. Again, they're going to be a lot more pricier, but there is the option of like crafting and making things yourself. But it outperforms synthetic materials a lot. I'm a huge fan of pit zippers and side zippers. That's like a must-have. Okay, heads and hands. And then I have 2 more slides and then we'll get a little interactive again. So I think about these layers as everything we've been doing so far. So activity dependent, it's useful to have multiple different weights. So even if you have 1 or 2 different weights of toques or hats to keep your head warm, that's super helpful. The mittens, you can do like a layering effect, but just make sure that you still have enough space in there that you're not just like constricting your hands, because that will make it colder. I hate gloves, but you need them when you need to have dexterity. Oops. Yeah, I mentioned that. Okay, feet is our last thing before getting back to an interactive little quiz fun thing. Everyone, I feel like, complains about cold feet. I feel like if you think about winter and you think about times you've been outside, maybe today, you had cold feet at some time. Feet, I think, are one of the hardest things to manage. One reason for that is because they sweat. We want to like make our feet warm, and so we like put so much insulation around them, which is important. And then they sweat, and then they get cold. Even if you don't think your feet sweat, they do sweat to some degree. So our socks really need to wick that moisture. And so that's when it comes to material. Cotton socks are just, they don't work well in the winter time. They're great for other seasons, but in the winter, when your feet get cold because they get wet, it's not going to be helpful. So if you're going to invest in anything for the winter time, I would say look into investing in some good wool socks. If you know anyone with a Costco membership or go to Costco, the men's wool socks aren't great because they don't have like the amount of wool in them is like not very high. But the woman's socks, and so if you have larger feet, just get like a bigger size. The woman's wool socks are actually really, really great from Costco because the amount of wool in them is quite. And then boots, again, it's dependent on activity. In the backcountry and on trip, I'm making sure that I have boots with removable liners. And that is important because I need to take those liners out to dry them out at the end of the day. If I don't have removable liners, then my boot's just gonna it's gonna freeze. And that's also happened to me on trips where it was raining and then it went below zero and my boots froze. It was the whole story. It was not fun. Yeah, frostbite. Yeah, so please, if you're doing multiple days outside in the winter, having removable liners is a really important step. And you can find like sometimes people will like because they don't like them, they're like big and clunky, they'll drop them off at thrift stores. So I found in the past as well, like big like old Sorel boots at thrift stores. Winter moccasins or mucklucks come from like Inuit and First Nation technology, and it's that idea of natural fibers being able to let that moisture out a lot better. So I know people who I don't have my own. I'm hoping to craft some this winter, but people who I know who have like winter moccasins or mucklucks, like love them because of their ability to ventilate. There's so many different options for boots, and really it stresses people out. I would say the best option, the biggest thing is have something where you have room in the shoe to move around, and go and look to see if you can find things at secondhand places before, because shoes are expensive before buying something. But we also want to take care of our feet. And speaking of feet, this was something I grew up with, is saving bread bags. And we have milk bags in Ontario as well. And this becomes a vapor barrier, which when your boot gets super wet, these can be super helpful. I wouldn't put them right next to my skin like in this picture. I would put my sock in and then put them over. And then a cool hack too is to put like a thinner sock over top of them too again, so that they don't slide down, and then that goes into your boot. So if your boot is soaked, at least this way your feet will stay dry, but eventually your feet will get wet again because of they will sweat. So but it's a good like temporary fix. So keep those bread bags. Okay, so I want to see how much you all know about the types of materials. So go back to Minty, enter in that code. And what's in your mind, what kills? Is it cotton, wool, fleece, or polyester propylene? Yes, all of you. And so there's this saying, cotton kills. And that basically comes back to the idea of I think it's like 90%, it loses like 90% of its ability to insulate. Okay. What material keeps you warm when wet? We got cotton, wool, fleece, or down. Yes, wool. And that's why wool is seen as like the leading um, fabric. Also, other cool things about wool is that it's flame retardant, which means like in winter, especially if you're winter camping, you're around fire a lot more because there's fire because you need it. And plastic and things made from synthetic fibers just get burn holes in them. So having wool is really nice because you're not going to get all your stuff having burn holes in them. It also is antimicrobial, so it doesn't smell as fast. I'm a smelly human, and so I really appreciate wool for that reason, that it does not get that smell as fast. Okay, what's true about merino wool? It's not as, and I think there's multiple correct answers here. So it's not as itchy as regular wool. It keeps you warm when wet. It's hard to darn, or it will get smelly fast. Mm. This is actually really fun to watch as these things come through. It's helping me because otherwise I feel like I'm alone in a room talking to myself. Um, so yes, all the answers that people have submitted are correct. So well, it won't get smelly fast, which is really cool. But it's not as itchy as merino, so it has like a finer gauge of that, like the gauge of the fibers of the material is finer. Words. And so that's why it doesn't itch as much. Some people still find it irritating, but it should be way less irritating than your classic wool. Keeps you warm and wet. That's the magic of the fiber. It is hard to darn. So I would say that is the huge downside of merino wool. It tends to be like quite expensive. And once you get a tear in it, it's really hard. You can't, like, it'll get a tear and you can't really mend it that easily. So that's just something to know about and care for your clothing, care for your fabric. But I still wear my merino wool that has raggedy holes in it because it's just such a good material. Okay, what's it cheaper? So we talked about merino wool. It's being really, it can be a really expensive thing. A cool place though to find it cheaper, again, Costco. They have, again, it's the women's section, which is like interesting because I feel like thin sections normally have better. But the women's section, I'm wearing one right now, actually. Every year they have these like merino wool base layer shirts that are $20 and it's 100% merino wool. So find someone with a Costco membership. Yeah, so cheaper as a base layer would be those synthetic blends. So polypropylene, polyester, you can find them when they're just polypropylene, or you can find it when they're mixed as well with merino wool. Nylon is kind of like that tint material, or that like material that's like on rain jackets. So it's that external fabric. Cashmere, if you don't know what cashmere is, it's like goat wool. And so it's even more expensive than wool, but it has like a higher insulating factor for the weight of it. Just a cool fun fact I learned. Okay, so we talked about alternative to wool as a base layer. What's alternatives to wool as a mid layer for price point? Cool. Yeah, so I'm glad that no one's that there's few like cotton hoodie there, because cotton hoodie, yes, it's way cheaper. And I would say don't go out and never have a cotton hoodie, but it won't keep you warm as much. So if you have the option between cotton and fleece or cotton and polyester, go for fleece or polyester. Those are going to be way better options for you in the winter. Again, if you're just going on like a random day hike, well, cotton can be really warm as long as you're managing that moisture. If you're going backcountry or something where you're not going to be inside for a couple of days, maybe just leave the cotton at home. But your fleece and your polyester are going to be the cheaper options. Down tends to be a little bit more pricey, but I do love me a good down. And then, yeah, sure. Yes. There we go. What's great at insulating when dry, but ineffective when wet? That's going to be your down. Down has like the highest weight to insulating ratio because of how much dead space it can create. But it needs to be dry to have that loft. The second that it gets wet, it loses that loft and is not as dry or not as effective anymore. Though there are companies playing with a hydrophobic down. Rab is playing with hydrophobic down, and some other companies as well. So there's really cool things happening in the world of down. It's getting a lot better, but it still won't be as insulating as like wool would be. Okay. That was a lot of information. I want to see, oh, it's already 7:41. Wow, that's awesome. I'm going to, what do I want to get through still? Okay. Some tips and tricks for clothing and layering. I think I mentioned a lot of these already. I think some that I'm just gonna like talk to really quickly is that, yeah, there's this be bold, start cold, and that's about the layering technique. So don't wait until you're hot to remove layers. Idea that like start cold because physical activity will warm you up. Like if you're going on a hike, for example. And the importance too, if we go down that of thrifting and the culture of crafting. So winter, the more traditional clothing that you start wanting to incorporate, like natural fibers and things like that, into your wardrobe, the more and more you're going to, like, if you start researching it or Googling it, the more and more you're going to see this culture of crafting come up and up and up, which is really cool and really exciting and different than a lot of other spaces. I think in the outdoor world, I think in summer stuff, we're like so much, we have to buy all this stuff. I think that happens in winter too, but in winter, there's this other level of crafting around things. So if you love crafting, we already do it. Like a lot of people knit things, knit scarves, knit slippers. Like we already do that to some extent in the winter. So yeah, crafting can be really a cool way to interact with your gear and with your clothing. And then the other thing is like body packing everything in the winter. So if you have a lighter, that's not going to work if it's cold. So you're going to have to body pack it, which means just having it underneath some layers of clothing so that your body heat keeps that. If you have a lot of medication have to be kept at certain temperatures, or if you're bringing in electronics. So if I'm bringing my phone with me, that's going into a pocket or close to me. Okay. Really quick on eating and drinking. Basically, you need to eat a lot more food in the wintertime. I think that's like self-explanatory, but tips and tricks for doing that is if you're going for multiple days, avoid like fresh fruits and vegetables. They're not going to be great. Pre-sliced, anything, those pre-sliced cheeses or like deli meats that are pre-sliced and all that, like bagels, not great if they're pre-sliced. If you're out for multiple hours or if you're out for multiple days, they're going to freeze together and not be helpful. A cool, fun trick and hack is put butter in everything, especially your hot chocolate. My go-to meal for winter are just squirrel lunches. So literally just cheese and crackers and any other additives to that. Nuts, just high fat and easy food are like go-tos galore. Does anyone know why you should not drink snow or eat snow? Well, it's fun, so you should. But in terms of like actually getting water into your system, it takes more energy to transfer that water from the solid state to the liquid state. Is that you're actually burning more, like you're burning quite a lot of calories for your body to do that process. So it's actually not it's not an efficient way, and it's actually not a great way to get that. That's a way of hydrating yourself. Hydration packs, everyone loves them in the summertime with like the tubes. The tubes just freeze in the winter. That's I've learned that through a mistake. Another cool hack is to store your water bottles upside down, because we know that water freezes from top to bottom, so that you can still open your water bottle, freeze it, or put it the other opposite way upside. I have so much information here. I know I wouldn't get through all of it, but having instant soups on hand is always nice, because you can just put those in a furnace. Okay, I'm going to talk really quick about sleeping warm, and then I'm going to get to some questions. So if you're thinking about some questions that you have, go ahead and you can start putting them into the Q&A thing. But sleeping warm is something that we all want to do. And there's, if you're going out into, like, if you're thinking about camping in the winter time, of course, you're going to want to sleep warm. The down versus synthetic bag is always that topic of like conversation. Which one is better? It's personal preference. I love down bags, but that's because I like to make things small and have it lighter. But I'm also tripping very specifically in the winter. I don't cold camp in the winter, which means I don't sleep out in just like a tent that doesn't have a heat source, that's not drying my things out for multiple days. So I'm sleeping in a hot tent that has a stove, so my down has the ability to dry out. So if you're looking at maybe like sleeping in snow structures or sleeping in a tent that doesn't have a hot stove or a way to dry your gear out for multiple days, then a synthetic bag is the better option. Down is also a lot more expensive than synthetic, like 3 or 4 times the amount. So that's also a huge thing to consider. And then you can also double up your bags. So last winter I was using like a -18 bag and a -7 bag that like I would just lay one over top of the other, and that I was comfortable at around -25, because I also have a good pad. It's not an exact science of how, there's like, you can find charts on the internet, but they're not accurate. They're not real, I found. And the ratings for bags are rated against a 21-year-old male in base layers. I don't know about you, but I am not a 20-year-old male who has the metabolism of a 21-year-old male. So just so you know that sleeping bag ratings denote survivability, not comfort. So it'll keep you alive this temperature, but it's not going to keep you comfortable at that temperature. So look at that intentionally when you're thinking about a bag to buy. And an important thing is liners. If you've never heard of a liner before, they are amazing because they, one, add warmth. They cut down on laundry. I'm terrified to wash my down bags because I've almost destroyed one, because there's a whole way of how to wash them. But now I just have a liner, and I only wash my liner and I don't wash my down bag. There's different weights you can buy of liners, and you can also make them yourself. So if you like go and get, if you have like an old fleece blanket that you find at the thrift store, and then you can like sew a line down the side of it, and there you have a fleece liner. That's gonna help you keep you warm. And then the last thing about your sleep system is your sleeping pads. So when you look at sleeping pads, they have this like R value. And R value is what we use for like insulation factor for like windows and houses as well. But the greater the R value, the greater it will resist heat transfer. Also, the greater the R value, the more expensive your thing is. And so rather than buying like one super expensive thing, you can also work and stack them, because it is. And so an R value of 5 or higher is kind of what you want for winter time. And so you can see in that picture there, that person has stacked like a closed cell foam. So like one of those like foam pads with then an air mattress on top of that. And then you can also put your parka jacket or your wool pants or snow pants or something like in between those layers, and that also will add insulation. So that's what lasagna is doing, is adding continuous things to those layers. And then if you have any silver So I think that sleeping pad, the yellow one there, might be silver on the other side. This isn't my picture. What I would do there is actually flip it upside down so that the silver faces up, and that can also reflect some of your body. Go pee and poo. Your body is keeping your pee and your poo warm inside of your body and using calories to do that rather than using calories to keep your body warm. So go pee and poo. You feel warmer after you do it because you don't need to keep those things warm anymore. You can keep your body warm. Yeah, I think I mentioned a lot of these. Hot water bottles. So if you have a type of water bottle that can hold hot water, to make sure you have a tight seal on it, but you can put that into your sleeping bag. Again, sleeping bags only keep things, they're like a thermos. If you put something cold, if your body's cold and you go inside your sleeping bag, it's going to keep you cold. So if you put a hot water bottle in first, it's going to heat up your sleeping bag. It's going to be all nice before you get in. But you can also heat it up yourself by just doing some exercises in it, because we all know that physical activity increases heat coming off of you. And then put all your electronics, like you would potty pack your electronics during the day, put all of your electronics into your sleeping bag overnight. And then this is a new one of attaching, if you need to have a watch, you can, my colleague tried this out this past week. They put it in their like toque because they needed to have an alarm to wake up to stoke the stove at night. And they put their watch in their toque and it worked perfectly. So if you need a place to put your watch, just put it in your toque. Wear a toque to bed also. Okay, so with that, I've been talking enough. I'm gonna get to some of your, hopefully you were able to take some things from that. How do I, oh, there it is. Okay, I have some questions here. And if you have more questions, feel free to pop them in. So, yeah, okay. The question is it all right to wear a wool base layer at the same time as a wool mid layer? Yes. If I could have everything wool, that's what I would do. So when I'm right now, my like mid layer, which is like this sweater, I think that this is like a polyester blend. But if this was wool, that would be even better to have my wool base layer and my wool mid layer. Combining wool is like supreme, is the best. Go to the men's section at thrift stores. That's where I find so much good wool sweaters, and check the tags. Look at the tags for 100% wool. I found a cashmere sweater for $14 in the men's section the other week. It was very exciting. Why butter? That's a great question. Because of how high of fat and calories butter has. So the question is, why butter? Is the difference with salty, non-salty? No, well, salt is good because like if you're sweating, having that salt come back into your body, but really it's not about the not salty factor. It's about the calories in butter. Plus it's like super tasty to put butter in your hot chocolate if you've never done that before. There's like that whole fad about putting butter in coffee as well. Coffee, I wouldn't recommend drinking a lot of it on winter trips because it does dehydrate you, but the butter is just like because it's higher in fat, and we want good fats in the winter time when we're outside for a long time. Will the slides be sent out via email? That's a great question. Can someone else answer that for me? I don't know if Alan can answer that. Oh, the Sleeping Warm boot bumpers. Oh yeah, okay, I didn't explain that. So the boot bumpers, basically, if you're in a tent with a lot of people and there's not place to put your boots around, so I'll take my liners out. I'll hang up my liners to dry. Hopefully you have a system where you can hang up things in your. This is again in a like a cotton canvas tent to hang up your liners. But even if I didn't have that, I would put my liners in my sleeping bag. And then I would take my boots and I would put them so that they face kind of outwards underneath my like hips. So they're part of that lasagna thing. And then the boot side is out. And then that like provides little bumpers. Plus, because it's close to my body, they're not going to freeze. So if you're cold camping, so you don't have a stove in your tent, having your boots close to your body is going to decrease them freezing. I have, like that story I was talking about, been in situations where my boots froze in the morning, and it's because I just left them outside and didn't do anything to them. So that's what the boot thing is about. Any advice for folks who don't wear wool as well? Yeah, so that would be looking at the polyester and polypropylene stuff and fleece. So if you look at cross-country skiers, my partner cross-country skis, and like you go into a cross-country ski store and they like do not have wool. They do not have natural fibers in there. It's all about like polypropylene, polyester. And the reason for that is because like it's so good at wicking and not holding moisture. So wool will hold more moisture than polypropylene or polyester will, but it will keep you warm when wet. But the idea for like cross-country skiers, because they're doing such physical activity, that they want it to just like go away, the moisture. So yeah, it would be that polypropylene polyester material, and like a polyester sweater or fleece. I find fleece is like very cost effective for the amount of heat that it can hold for you. Hopefully that answers that. Okay. Do you have any solutions for the phenomenon where your body moisture is pushed out through your layers, then freezes on the inside of your wind layer? That's a great question. I have been last winter, I was cross-country skiing, and I had this like, I had my 2 layers that I normally wear, my base layer, and then my my other layer that has a little, it's like a mid layer, but it has a little bit of windproof. And it allows moisture to go through really well. It's a synthetic material, but it was colder. So I put on a vest. And when I stopped, I took the vest off, and that exact thing was happening where I was completely like, I was pretty dry. The mid layer was pretty dry, but then there was a layer of moisture and like wetness, sweat, water, basically on the inside of that other layer of the vest. And if I just stood around outside, that would have frozen. So the reason for that is just that outer layer is just not good at ventilating. So you can't necessarily, like the way that I mitigated that was just taking off that vest. You can't necessarily do that all the time. But the key here is if it's getting inside, if it's that shell layer that you're worried about, is getting things that have like zip for the pit zips or side zips to at least allow a place for some like moisture, vapor, and stuff to exit. But yeah, that's hard. These are fun questions. Any other? I think I did those ones. If there's any other questions, but I'll finish with I'll finish this with this slide. So I talked about like cold camping versus hot camping. So cold camping is the stuff that's on the left, and hot camping is the stuff on the right. And I know this like language isn't super evident or like known if you haven't done those things. So hot camping is basically like you'll see in the bottom right picture, there's a stove there. This picture was taken last week, so those are Outward Bound staff there. So there's a stove inside, and like it's not hot, like you can get it hot in there, but you don't sleep with it really, really hot. But the stove is continuously going so it can dry things. Cold camping, on the other hand, is like in your snow structures or in your actual tent. I would say snow structures are a lot more insulating. If you're interested in snow structures, like Google Quinzys or snow trenches are the two that are my two favorite. So Quincy's there on the bottom left, and then beside that is a snow trench, which is a lot less work to build than a Quincy, but it still gives you good insulating from the snow on the side there. Yeah, hopefully, this has been helpful and meaningful to folks. I really love winter and get passionate about this stuff. So hopefully you're able to see and absorb some of that passion and excitement. And you can have all the information and all the tips and tricks in the world, but really it's about just going outside and testing your own systems, because what's going to be more impactful to you than listening to me talk about, oh, body packing your phone or whatever, is actually just like going and your battery dying because you didn't body pack your phone and then you learn about it. So anyways, I hope this was helpful. And I still don't know the answer about if you're going to get access to these slides, but if you are interested in things, you could also you could email Outward Bound. You could, Alan, who should I email? Could email someone, and then that could get to me, and then I could send this out to you, if that works. So yeah, thanks for joining, everyone. Yeah, I'll feel free to, I don't know, leave ending things is awkward. But if you have any last questions, feel free to put them into that Q&A. I'm still looking at that. If not, hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening and you get outside this women. Thanks, friends.